You're listening to Hockey Talk on the Rock
All right, stop.
with Laura and Keith.
It's interesting.
So let's back up a second.
He played absolutely out of his mind.
It made no sense to me.
And now, here are your
All right,
hosts.
well, let's hit the ground running, I guess, and welcome back to Hockey Talk on the Rock. Here we are again, Friday, February 26th, coming to you live from Laura's house. That's Laura. I'm Keith. We're on Salt Spring, and we are trying to do Hockey Talk on the Rock. Before I throw to you for your starting off rant, I did want to quickly throw something in before I forget.
Okay.
Because last week we both sported our retro reverse jerseys.
Yes.
I still like them. I do want to say, though, I don't like them on the ice as much.
Yeah, like
Get
in
the
terms
stuff.
of visually.
Yeah.
Here's what I think. And I understand why they did the gradient and all that, and I like the idea of the gradient. I really like the navy blue with that green. I think it really pops, and I actually like that part of it more on the ice. But the gradient itself, I liked less.
Okay. So in person, I like the total everything.
Yeah.
But I found when I was watching on the ice, the navy to me looked too dark.
Okay.
And it just kind of threw me off. I don't know why. Maybe it's just after, a couple decades or however it's long of doing this blue,
Yeah.
the brighter blue that I'm so used to or something. But yeah, how dark it was kind of threw me.
Yeah. I just really like the contrast of the green, I guess. But
No,
yeah.
I like that. I agree with that for sure.
I don't have a big problem with them because I think the Canucks, maybe this is not the right thing to say about the Canucks jersey history, but in the past little while, in terms of anything retro, it's always the same thing. Like, they're not that inventive. And I was thinking about this today, actually. I don't know why, but the jersey that you have behind you, which was like the first time that they rebranded from this look, that itself is basically a reverse retro.
Right.
Like, before the reverse retros happen. And like, there's stuff they could have done, right? Like, they could have done a green and blue like skate jersey, or they could have done something with the stick and rink, but I think the stick and rink at this point has kind of been overdone. Like, they've had so many of those jerseys, and then the skate jersey that they brought back last year was perfect, but I don't think it would look as good in blue and green. So I like that they tried something different, and I still think it looked okay. I doubt we ever see them on the ice again. But,
I maintain that they should have went with the blue and green flying V. I think that would have worked.
I honestly just want them at one point in my lifetime to just do the flying V, like full out for a third jersey. It will look ridiculous, but it would be so funny. That's what I want. One time, like one game,
Nah,
and then
I bet that would happen.
yeah. But in general, I don't know. I do have a rant, as you kind of hinted at. I'm sure you were suspecting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's been a week. I think they played last night or last time after we talked.
Yeah.
I think they played 3 other games since then, going 0 for 4.
And they lost all of them. Yeah. They got 1 point out of one game.
A game that they were leading 2-0.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I'll say this, okay? So after they blew that 2-0 lead to Winnipeg, that was basically exactly the same game that we saw a week earlier against Calgary. Like, almost, move for move, period for period, it was the same. And then they go out to play Edmonton, and they get that 3-0 lead in the first period. And I make a remark that I'm like, well, I'm glad that they're showing a bit more, like, not, I guess, killer instinct by getting that third goal, because they haven't done that yet. Whenever they've given up a lead, it's been the 2-0 thing. But then I also said, I don't think Edmonton's out of this game yet. And then they play the second period. And I actually think of that game, the second period was the Canucks' worst, but Thatcher Demko played pretty good. And so that kind of negated it. And then the third period happens, and the goal for me that just absolutely destroyed me as a fan was the second goal that Edmonton scored. I think it was Draisaitl to Cahoon. And Thatcher Demko had just made this amazing save. And then the puck slides out, and I think there's 4 Canucks that are literally just standing there watching Draisaitl pass the puck in front of the net. It's like, what are you doing?
Right.
You're just not competing. And it comes to this point where there's only so many things you can say because it's literally the same. It's not the same script. It's like finding different ways to disappoint you every game. So, at least they're changing it up a bit. But like, I don't know. There's so many problems with this Canucks team. I don't even really know where to start. But one thing, I don't know. I guess I'll say one of the positives I thought this week that then got negated was putting Zach McEwen back in the lineup. I really liked that. And actually, one of the reasons why I liked it is I thought that it made Virtanen actually more noticeable before they bumped him up the lineup because of his speed. And because Jay Beagle is so slow and frustrating to watch night in and night out on that 4th line, I think having the 2 faster players with him made that line better, even though they didn't really get any results. And then they took McEwen out to put Howerlick in. And again, I'm fine with them putting Howerlick in. That's fine. But I really think at this stage of the season, McEwen should be in the lineup every night. You should see what you have with him. Again, for a lot of these younger guys, like, put him in, let him play, take Jay Beagle out for a night. If the only reason Beagle's in the lineup is to penalty kill, I think you have other problems, which they do. And then I guess kind of I'll just bump into the Virtanen thing for a sec here, because that period last night, well, the first period he played he was pretty awful. He took the 2 penalties, and one of them wasn't his fault, right? That was kind of fluky, but the second one was he wasn't moving his feet, and then he gets the hooking call or whatever. But then the second period, he was noticeable, and he had multiple scoring chances playing with better players in Horvat and Pearson. And I do think that if the Canucks want to trade Jake Virtanen, it's probably in their advantage to play him up the lineup a bit and see what you have with him. He did score 18 goals last year. If you're set that you want to move on from him, it's gonna, I need one more thing, sorry. Then play him up the lineup, see if he can put in some goals, and then see if you can sell him at a higher price point kind of thing. The thing with Jake Virtanen that evidently is the hang up in this trade talk is because they inflated the second year of his contract to be worth a lot more. Which, again, if you just look at Jim Benning, it's like, why did you do that? If you as a group decided you were moving on from Jake, which it seemed like you did in the summer, and then you're like, oh, I guess I need to sign Jake, and then go in and set up the contract in that way, it makes zero sense to me. And it's just so frustrating to watch. And I really don't think that management is going to change until potentially the offseason, if then. And I don't think the coaching staff is going to change. I'll get into that later. I'll let you respond a bit here, add something in. And it's just getting to the point where it's like, what is the point? And this Canucks team, with the reason why I'm wearing this jersey, is this is the worst start they've had in franchise history outside of 1997 when Messier was on the team. And I think lots of Canucks fans anyway, regard that era as being like the worst era of Canucks hockey. But I do think that Jim Benning's era has to be getting up there. I mean, it's been 7 years. We've had the one playoff run. We've had the one playoff experience. And it's just this team is so
though, right? Because they won in 2015.
Sorry, Benning was there in 2015. Okay. Yeah, so there was 2 years. But, the 2015 year wasn't really his team, I guess, right? Like, that was when his first year on the job, so it was still kind of previous regime. This is the product that Benning has built now. Yeah. 100%, right? Anyway.
So I think I'll weigh in quickly on the Jake thing, and I was basically just going to say exactly what you said, that like no one wants to make a deal, or a good deal at least, because of that second year, and it makes no sense. You can still try to justify it off of his 18 goals last year or whatever, but you look at the second half of the season last year and he had 2 goals.
Yeah.
So.
And the playoffs too, right? Like that's
the playoffs. So it was like end of last season was not good. The bubble was not good. We're still not good, right? So like, you know, I'm over it. Pretend's kind of like they should have let him walk in the summer. We've already discussed it.
Yeah.
I also want to just quickly agree with you on McEwen. I think he should be a regular at this point. At least he gives a shit and tries, and like you got to see what you got in these guys at some point. So who cares about how much money's up in the booth at this point? And lastly, and it's kind of like the thing I'll get into that I know you're going to feed off of because you're probably itching to, is like we've been talking about the changes that they could do with Benning, and we hope Benning goes, and Coach Green's probably pretty good, and hopefully he doesn't go. But I found this week, I really felt a switch in myself from fire Benning to fire Benning and Green.
Yeah.
And the reason I have with that is because like I love talking hockey. I love to sit here and like, let's talk about how the lines could be configured this week. And like, let's put Miller with Horvat and that'd be fun too. But like, I think the reason now I've gone from that one to the other is the Benning thing is obvious. Like he mismanaged the roster and players have left and because they couldn't afford him because the shit he's done. And I think that we all know that the players that left, especially like Markey and Tanev, really affected the room. But this is where I'm starting to think this is now on the coach. Like it's been nearly half the season. Those guys are gone. If the players can't get it going and they're still bummed or whatever, because like we've talked about, like Nate Schmidt should be playing better and he hasn't fit into the system that well and they haven't integrated that well. So I think it's on Green, and you know I think he should get fired, and I hope he gets hired into another job because I bet you he learns from this one and becomes a great coach on the next franchise.
So I was gonna talk about Green, obviously, and I think there's multiple layers because I have two kind of thoughts that contradict one another. So I agree with you, and I guess I'm at the point with this Canucks team where I'm so apathetic to where they are and how they're playing that to me everyone should be in the spotlight. Like there shouldn't be anyone that's safe from criticism right now. I think Green needs to kind of be held accountable for the like lack, I guess, of system buy-in by the team, because again, if that is his system, then he shouldn't be an NHL coach. And I think we all know he is pretty decent, but there's something being lost in translation. And other teams this season had a lot of changes on their roster as well. It's not just the Canucks, right? And I do get to some degree the idea that when the team goes into a tailspin in this situation with the season where they can't really get together, that yeah, it probably is harder to get out of that rut. But again, it's like there are a few other teams that are, you know, spiraling, but not to the same level or not for the length of time that the Canucks have. The Canucks haven't had a good week this season, really. Like they've had a couple okay weeks, but really, you know, consecutive games have been hard to win. So yeah, I think you have to look at Travis Green and you have to say, is he the right guy for you? But then this is the flip side to it, is that again, I think he's a decent coach. And I don't think that necessarily the problems with this team should rely on him, because I think he's probably coaching the best that he can with the group that he has. However, he doesn't have a contract for next season, which we brought up before. And I think that in this situation, if ownership, because I assume it's going to have to go above Benning at this stage, says, yeah, that's who we want coaching our team. We want Jim. Figure out a deal and sign him. If you don't want him, fire him. This like in-between thing that they're doing, I think is actually adding to the problem in Vancouver. And the longer it goes where they have him unsigned, I think the more open Green will first of all be to leave, kind of like Markstrom and Tanev and all those guys. And I really think he'll end up being the coach of Seattle. That would be my bet right now. I think he walks and he goes to Seattle.
Right.
But again, do I think that it's all on Green? No, but I think that if you fired him, it would be justifiable right now. I wouldn't have a problem with it. And on top of that, kind of getting into a bit of NHL news, I guess, because Montreal did fire their coach this year.
Good. I was going to go there next.
So Claude Julien's out, and then they're bringing in or elevating Dominic Ducharme and then Alex Burrows, who I know a lot of Canucks fans wanted to coach in Vancouver, and maybe one day it happens, right? And for me, waking up and seeing that like notification, it was again almost insulting in a Canucks fan perspective, because it's like, okay, you are allowed to make changes in a pandemic shortened season, you know, you can do it. And I get it that Jeff Molson, probably because he owns a liquor company, isn't doing as bad during the pandemic as some of the other owners, so it probably doesn't matter as much to him. And yes, Montreal's had a couple tough weeks now after playing the Canucks, you know, 6 times and doing pretty good in the first bit. And I get again that they spent a lot of money in the off season and they probably want to do well. But again, I think Montreal's such an interesting team because we all said at the beginning of the season, I know you picked them to win the North, and I think everyone agreed that they were going to be better, but this team still hasn't got like it doesn't have superstar talent yet, at least not up front. And it's got a lot of good pieces, like a lot of good 50 to 60 point guys, but it doesn't have that one guy that's really all-star. Kind of like if you think about Nashville like a few years ago,
Right.
that style team, and they're younger than that. So there's going to be bumps. I kind of thought it was a bit spontaneous, maybe not justified, but at the same time, I think because Marc Bergevin has been there for so long, and again, his tenure has been like very up and down. I know there was periods where he looked terrible, and now when you look back at his time, he's done quite well. Like pretty much all of his trades he's won, which I think is a pretty good sign as a GM. I feel like he's bought himself more time. So if he feels like it was the coach, I think that ownership would go with that decision right now. Obviously they did, right? But
yeah, I mean, Montreal, like you say, it's not a comparable really to Vancouver in the sense that, like you say, the owner gave Bergevin the nod to spend all that money. Like I'm pretty sure they spent more money than any other team in the offseason.
They did.
So the expectation is a lot different, right? Whereas like they brought in Josh Anderson, Jake Allen, you know, they made some big moves. Tyler Toffoli, as we all know, and the Canucks did the almost opposite, right?
Yeah.
They like instead of bringing in a good goal, like they brought in old people, like they let their main guy go, they let that guy go, they brought in a cheap option in Holtby, like they didn't spend in that way. So I think the expectation from the ownership perspective are polar opposites. And I also think because, like you say, Bergevin's tenure has been quite long now, that he might actually be on the hot seat. Like I kind of have a feeling that this summer was like, I know it's the pandemic, but there's moves to be made. And the owner said, okay, but if you don't get the results this year, like
it's done.
I think so. So I think Bergevin played the coach card when things started to like lose control at a right time, I think, before it got too bad. But I think it wasn't Julien's fault. I really think that the team I think Carey Price is the reason to blame slide lately. Even when they were winning, it was because they were playing really, really well, both offensively and defensively, and he didn't have to be a world stopper, you know?
Right. And Carey Price's numbers like this whole season haven't been great. And I do think that if the play-in round hadn't happened, I kind of suspect, because again, Montreal was in such a different place last year, right? Like when the pandemic happened, they were not a good team. They get this kind of gift given to them in the sense that they get to play in that play-in round. They were the 12th seed. They're the 12th seed, and then they wound up beating Pittsburgh, largely in part to Carey Price, right? And then all of a sudden, the expectations for that team change. I kind of suspect that if they hadn't had that plan, that maybe Bergevin would have been fired last summer. But because they did so well, it changed. It kind of gave him new life. And as you say, maybe it is. They said, okay, you have 1 year. Show us what you got. Was that a fluke or what kind of thing? But again, he's such a weird GM to judge because I do like most of his moves in retrospect, but at the time I was like, what are you thinking for half of them, right? But I think he's made the team better. And then again, at a certain point in time, you need a new, fresh set of eyes to look over things.
Yeah.
I think for the Canucks has been long overdue. And for myself, like personally, I was never like a big firebending person really until this year. I was saying, give him time, let him see what he does with his drafting. And on some regard, I kind of understood the contracts because the Canucks needed someone to play for them because you don't want to become the Edmonton Oilers, which is, or the Buffalo Sabres where they are now. You don't want to stick your players in that aren't ready too young. And for me now, I think that's the most frustrating part, though, is that we've seen like the betting draft picks that are going to be stars are basically all in the Canucks lineup now. I think the one player that will be a legit NHL player that isn't is Podkolzin, and he's probably going to play at some point this season. But if you look down in the AHL, they don't have that many prospects that are ready to play NHL minutes. So if you were going to scrap this season, which I think is the right call, I think they should sell, and I think they should try and get as much as they can for their assets. But at the same time, who's going to come and play for you? Because I think maybe Cole Lind, you could see what he's got in a bottom six role. But beyond that, down there, I don't think they have much. I think it's all these old shitty contracts that you're going to see play out. And that's that. But I do think it's time for a change. It sucks that it's a pandemic, but you own a sports team. Like, deal with it. Otherwise, don't own a sports team.
Right.
Anyway, that's like basically my massive rant. But I will say one more thing. I don't know. So there was like a report today from TSN that Darren Dreger put out that said that basically every other NHL GM has heard from Jim Benning in the past couple weeks, and he's looking for a top 9 forward. And I'm like, okay, that's great, but what would the Canucks have to give up to get a young top 9 forward right now?
Right.
Like, I don't see it. But
They could be willing to depend. Like top 9's pretty loose, right?
yeah.
Jim's probably feeling the heat, right? So I could see him be willing to deal with a team who's looking to add to their defense and be willing to trade a Jordy Ben plus a second.
Okay.
Something like that, because Jordy's only on the books for this year, $2 million, a team who needs an extra body on the back end. And I can see, like, I hate to say it, but no, I even Jim, I don't think I can see him dealing a first, actually. But I can see him going aside as a second.
You couldn't deal the first this year, not with how it's been going, right? Like,
yeah,
there's no way unless you protect it for something. But like, and that goes into the draft. Sorry, I just thought I was done, but I'm not quite, because there's the other kind of aspect to this whole year. Again, with keeping Jim until the summer, that's so detrimental, is the fact that if you have to bring in someone before the draft and the expansion draft, you're going to be asking that person to get off basically 10 feet behind. Like, they're not going to have much of a chance to prepare, right? And it's almost like put everyone out of their misery, make your decision. If you're firing him, fire him. And it's the same thing I say with Green, right? Like, this kind of weird murky gray area that no one knows what's going on. It sucks for everyone. It sucks for the players. It sucks for them. Like, just make your decision and stick with it. And on top of that, this isn't as dramatic a point, but I did have a good chuckle last night watching Green's lines all get juggled around, because it reminded me so much of watching Alain Vigneault.
Yeah.
That was such a Vigneault move. And on one hand, like, I understand why he put Miller on the third line, in part because he's been playing a lot of minutes by playing on the PK and the PP and on the first line. And he's also not been great, but I don't think any Canuck this year, besides for maybe Höglander, has been like overall good.
Right.
again, there's moments, right? Like I think Besser's had good moments to this season, but he's also got a lot of problems. You know, Quinn Hughes offensively has been very good, but defensively has been a disaster. And Pettersson is getting better. He's getting more engaged, but he definitely wasn't himself to begin. So it's just like, yeah, I don't know. And then again, it's just the idea of what you're actually trading away, because the whole rumors with Virtanen and Gaudette, it's like selling someone at their lowest point. And I know like Anaheim was evidently really interested in Virtanen, and the rumor was like bringing back Danton Heinen, which would be essentially like bringing back Jake Virtanen.
Right.
Like you're getting the same players. I don't know. Anyway, I'll get off the Canucks, but it's been a really frustrating week and very.
Well, they're done. They have no more games in February, if that makes it feel better.
Okay, I'll just say one more point. The other thing that is really irritating me about the Canucks right now is the fact that this division is so weak. And like we see, like Montreal hasn't been playing well. Calgary has been a disaster. And you've got the top three teams, you know, you've got your Toronto, your Winnipeg, your Edmonton. Again, I think Edmonton is flawed. I think basically if you look at every team in the North, you could pick out a issue that would be quite big. But those three teams right now are ahead of the pack. That fourth playoff spot is like this turtle race between four teams, because now Ottawa is basically the same as Vancouver. Not quite there, but we're almost there. And it's like none of them won it. And what really annoys me is if I had any faith in the Canucks that they could string together like 3 wins in a row, or like a section where they win like 5 out of 7 games, it's like, yeah, okay, maybe they could crawl back in it. But I think because we've all seen how just absolute dog shit they've played for this entire year, we all just know that there's no way.
Well, I think that I'll throw this at you, that I don't even think if they went on a 9-game win streak it would matter at this point, because for like in the past you'd be able to rely on, you know, Edmonton or Calgary or whoever going on a 6 or 7 game slide, but it would be like on a swing where they hit up
Yeah.
Islanders, the Devils, the Rangers, the Flyers, the Penguins, and they come back. Whereas every single night somebody in their division is getting points and getting a win. And so this year I just don't see them outwinning Calgary and Winnipeg and Edmonton and Montreal and Toronto when they all have the same opponents.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think that, like, again, if they seriously had wanted to put themselves into the conversation this last week, they would have needed like the majority of points. Like this homestand was big. And just to kind of tie it back to what you said earlier, they didn't get enough. And I do think that is probably on the coaching staff.
I think so. And I mean, 2 wins in February out of 13 is, I think they said that's a franchise low. It was bad. And they have the second lowest percentage of making the playoffs. Detroit's the only team lower than them right now.
I know. And again, I just reiterating one more point. It's not like they're playing a bunch of really good teams. Like this division isn't that good. And that's the part that also stings. And then I guess adding insult to injury, in the last week, we saw the Canucks twice do the thing that I think only the Canucks do this so well, which is when you make kind of backup and shitty old goaltenders look like all-stars. You had the Laurent Brossoit and then the Mike Smith shutouts. And
Right.
those were both like such Canuck efforts.
I will say though, Smith has played really good since he's come back, and it kind of really bugs me.
I don't think it's gonna last.
So I want to throw just one quick parallel from a previous rant you had.
Okay.
So that's interesting. Again, kind of like comparing Montreal and Vancouver, but in how differently things are. And you were saying that, like, you know, because of Carey Price's play in the bubble, it affected how the team went through the summer. And it's so crazy to see this exact same thing with Vancouver with Demko, right? Because now you think back to that bubble, and if he didn't come in and play those 3 games against Vegas, how different would things be, right?
Yeah. like, I will say this, I do think Demko has played well. Like last night, I thought he had a good game, and I thought he had a good game the night before in Edmonton. I don't think he's been like spectacular, but I do think he's gonna be a starting NHL goalie. Like,
Oh, me too. And I'm not getting down on Demko. I'm just saying
no, I
it's
agree.
crazy how big of an effect the bubble had
Yeah.
on teams moving forward
Yeah.
to this season.
And like 100%, I feel like, yeah, the Canucks would have had to have re-signed Markstrom. They would have had to have figured out some way if Demko hadn't played those 3 games.
I think he would have, yeah.
And maybe again, there is too much judgment based off of like a set of games with like many teams, right? But anyway, that's the Canucks. It's not a happy time.
No, it can only go up.
It can only go up. Hopefully, just looking for like something positive out of this season is too depressing. And like, just in terms of drafting, I know they've spoken a lot about pushing this year's draft back a year so that they can actually scout these players, but there's a whole bunch of issues with that in terms of like the PA. So,
yeah, the rights and the free agency and stuff like that, yeah.
So I kind of have a feeling it's not going to happen, but we'll see. But this is probably like the shittiest year to have a high pick. So if the Canucks do end up getting like a top 3 pick this year, a top 3 might be fine, but like, a high first round pick, it might be better off getting something in the middle.
And Luke Hughes is supposed to go up top.
I know. The Luke Hughes hype train would be pretty sweet.
Yeah.
And there are like quite a few highly ranked D-men for this draft coming up, and I do think that that's the area for the Canucks that they really need to shore up. So in some ways it might be fine, but it would be the Canucks' luck for this year, the year that they get like first overall, when there's kind of no bona fide number 1 pick, and like there's a bunch of players all around the same level. But I would still take it.
You never know. It could end up being like the history of Patrick draft, where they were like, they didn't know there was no real number 1, and then we got PT and they went sweet for you guys. So
yeah, that ended up good for Vancouver that year, so we can only hope. I will laugh though, because I know a couple episodes ago, this is going to the Devils, you asked me if I would trade like Adam Gaudette straight up for Pavel Zacha, and I said no. And then now Pavel Zacha has gotten like a bunch of points in like the last 2 weeks. I'm like, maybe Pavel Zacha, there is something there. But, again, it's too soon to tell with him.
No, I think Gaudette they need to hold on to for a little bit longer, but yeah.
I think they need his contract, if anything. Like, you just need someone who can play in the NHL who's not making, that much money. And maybe he breaks out and is okay, but even if he's not, he was a 5th round pick. It's basically found money, so But anyway, moving on from the Canucks, in terms of other kind of tire fires in the NHL and contract situations, there's the Jeff Skinner situation in Buffalo, and that one's pretty I'm gonna say uncomfortable to watch, and maybe I just have like, I just feel empathetic to Buffalo because of all the Canucks shitty contracts. But I think we all knew that when he signed that deal, which is $9 million for the max amount of years, that it wasn't going to age well, and it probably wasn't going to be good, because he scored 40 goals 1 year and it was most likely a career year. But again, this situation I find kind of similar to Vancouver's, in the sense that we talked a bit about Ralph Krueger last week, and that all the players seem to love playing for him. But like, if you're scratching, which is what's happening now with Jeff Skinner, for 3 straight games, your $9 million player, like, there's no good that's going to come out of that. For me, I think you'd want to try playing him. Like, your team sucks.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking about Ralph Krueger. It was either yesterday or today, and I was thinking, it's kind of weird that Buffalo would think it was a good idea when Edmonton tried this already.
Yeah.
They brought him in with the young roster to be the player's coach, to get out of the rebuild. and it didn't work. And then they were like, well, it's Buffalo though, and he's learned. It
I
just seems
feel like it's basically the new Edmonton.
they are the new Edmonton, and I think they put a lot too much of stock into when he like coached Team Europe to the World Cup.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I don't know. I have no idea what his coaching style is actually like. I just know from the interviews with Eichel and stuff of him basically saying he's like the best coach he's ever played for, and then obviously Taylor Hall wanted to go back and play for him, and that was a big part of it.
But that in itself seems a bit like a problem, you know. I
Yeah.
remember when the Blackhawks stars were young, and Dennis Savard was the Blackhawks coach, and they fired him, and Patrick Kane cried, right? And it was like, oh no, you know, this young superstar is so upset.
Yeah.
And he's, you know, and then he became a superstar and won 3 Stanley Cups with a different coach. Like it didn't matter in the end, right? So
Yeah. No, it's true. And voices do get old, right? It comes down to that. I mean, Ralph Kruger has only been there for what, 2 years? This is his second year. But I just think again, that whole situation, like if they buy out Jeff Skinner this summer, which I'm kind of guessing they do, it's gonna end up being like such a big chunk of their cap for so long.
I don't think they will,
You
because
don't think so?
it would be on the cap for them for 12 years if they do it this summer. And because it's for so much money, it would be like, you know, still 40 million or something like that, right?
It's something crazy. Like,
So
and
I don't,
again, like I do kind of get it. Like I get why they gave him that money, because to get people to stay in Buffalo isn't easy, and he was working with like Eichel at that point in time. So I do understand it. But that's why in my head I'm like, yeah, okay, I don't think Ralph Kruger is gonna last, because at some point in time the ownership there is gonna say, well, this guy did work with Eichel at one point in time. You know, he should be at least playing on one of those top two lines. But
yeah.
anyway, that's Buffalo. And then there's Calgary, just the other kind of, again, dumpster fire of the North right now. And they lost 6-1 to Ottawa. And I was pretty sure Jeff Ward was going to get fired today, but that didn't happen.
Pretty sure you owe me a drink there. No big
Yeah,
deal.
I do. It's okay. But, you know, Calgary's another team. Like, obviously, I'm not a fan of them, but I've been around a lot of Flames fans and been exposed to a lot of Flames media over the last few years, and they're a team that they never seem to get a decent coach. Like they don't spend the money on coaches. And at some point in time, you got to think they're going to bring in someone with experience. I am going to tie this back into Vancouver for 2 seconds because I did want to say that earlier. If the Canucks do get rid of Green, that's my kind of fear, is that right now this ownership isn't going to want to pay anyone money. And so, you know, whether or not he walks at the end of the year, or they fire him, they're going to have to hire someone else next year. And they don't really have anyone right now in their like AHL that I think they would promote to head coach. So then it becomes this question of kind of which bottom of the barrel coach are you getting for the Canucks next year?
Right.
But Calgary's kind of similar position with that. I don't know. I don't know what Calgary does, but there's lots of problems in that city as well, which we kind of talked about last week.
Yes.
Anyway, and then I have two more little notes.
Okay.
First one is the whole Panarin situation, because I mean, I don't really want to get into that much, but basically it seems like he's getting thrown under the bus for being a vocal supporter of Putin's opposition. And because of that, there's been some hit piece written about him that he beat up an 18-year-old girl. It's not funny, obviously. If it is true, it's not good. But he's taken a leave of absence from the Rangers because of this. And it's one of those things that when it came out, I think almost everyone was like, well, that's definitely not true. There's no report. There's nothing to back it up. But it sucks for both of us because both of us have him in various fantasy leagues. And like, again, in terms of that team, they're going to obviously be down their best player. And I just hope it's not for too long.
I was talking about this the other day, and I was like, I don't I can't see him sitting out for very long because what's he gonna do?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know if maybe he was trying to get like family out of Russia, but
Yeah,
I agree. What would he do?
just sit around and mope.
Yeah.
This sucks, you know. You think even distracted, you still want to go out and play. So I can't see him.
And I don't know, like, in terms of the NHL, right? Because when, what's his name? The Russian defenseman who played for LA, who beat up his wife.
Oh, no, Martinez, the other one.
Yeah. I don't
Yeah.
know. I can't think of his name, but like that was such a big deal, right? For the NHL. Like they suspended him for a year after that.
Yeah.
And I wonder if maybe it was the Rangers saying to Panarin, like, you should sit out and we'll just figure this out with the league.
Oh.
Like,
Slava Voinov.
yeah, Voinov, yeah. Like, or I don't know, something to do with that, but I don't know. Anyway, I hope he's back for my fantasy team.
Me too.
And then my last kind of note of a group that I wanted to talk about was the LA Kings, because they have been doing stupidly good, and I realized that division is not very good. But it's like way more competitive than you would expect, because I think before the season started, we all expected, Colorado, St. Louis, and Vegas to run away with it, and then whoever gets that fourth spot was probably going to be a shitty team. But St. Louis and Colorado both haven't looked that good, and I think Colorado will figure it out, and maybe it's actually in their advantage to have this bit of a struggle now, and they'll kind of do what Tampa did last year, where they get on a roll at the right time. But St. Louis, I think, needs to figure out some stuff, and they have a lot of injuries, so not totally their fault. But LA seems to be the team, like them and Arizona, who I also thought was going to be like complete crap, seem to be staying in this fight. And like the Kings have now won 6 games in a row, and I think Dustin Brown is like 5th in the league for goals scored or something. And obviously that's going to come down, I know that, but it is an interesting story at this point of the season. And
Yeah, before we wrap up here, I'll throw 2 things out of the Kings, and one of them was that I saw that they're looking for a dynamic defense in a trade, and I bet you they're going to totally regret not taking Drysdale with that number 2 pick.
you want to say it, yeah.
He's already got 5 points in 5 games with the Ducks. Apparently looked pretty good. I don't see Byfield, just saying. And the second thing I'll say is, apparently what I read was ownership and Rob Blake and upper management sat down with the team when they're not playing, like when everyone else got through the bubble, and was like, look, we've done what we're gonna do. We've traded out the guys we're gonna trade out, and we've stripped it down around you guys. You guys are the core we're rebuilding with.
Yeah.
So, run with it or don't. And so that plus apparently Doughty's very motivated to wanting to be on Team Canada if they do the Olympics. So those 2 things combined led to, I'm pretty sure, this, because like you said, Dustin Brown's 5th in the league in goals right now, which is insane because he's not a very good hockey player, at least hasn't been for a number of years.
No, yeah.
Kopitar's having a big resurgence. Doughty's having a big resurgence. Quick's playing like almost prime-ish, know? So it's interesting to hear the behind-the-scenes stuff and know that the message seems to have got through to the core in such a way that you're like seeing the results. I don't think it's going to hold for the rest of the year. I think they'll end up missing ultimately, but I think like based on how many young players they have coming up, it's going to be LA's going to get good quickly.
Yeah, I do think they've got to have either them or Ottawa in terms of like the number of and then quality of prospects has like the best prospect pool right now, including their young players in the league. I think that both of them are in a good position moving forward. And again, it does make you kind of jealous, right? When you see other teams go through it and strip the team down and get all these prospects that are gonna play. And like in terms of a Canucks perspective, they do have a lot of young talent, but I was listening to a bit of the new like Nation post game kind of YouTube show that Rob Fay is now doing.
Okay.
So I was listening to that last night, and he was saying, Bo Horvat is 25 now, and Brock Besser just turned 24 last night. In 2 years, your bad contracts are going to be off the books, and that's great and all, but time does go on. These guys do get older, and at a certain point in time, you need to introduce more young blood. And I am just worried, maybe prematurely worried, because this year they could draft a bunch of really decent players and it could switch it up. But last year, the lack of draft picks, I feel like, is going to come back and hurt the Canucks. And then just in general, when you look at Benning's tenure with Vancouver, he was very willing to give out those extra picks. And, a lot of them were second, third, fourth round picks or whatever. And that's fine. You're probably not always getting a star in those positions or an NHL player, but you do want to put, I guess, as many bullets as you can in the gun, right? And some of those picks you hope are going to make up. And you look at two teams in LA and Ottawa, again, their ownership is a disaster, but like they've done it quite quickly in the sense where they were a decent team in 2017 or 2016, one of the two, when they almost went to the final. And then they decided, okay, we don't want to pay our players. We're going to strip it down. We're going to start over again. And they've just restocked with so many high-end prospects. I am a bit jealous.
I'll tell you one thing. Both those teams, in my opinion, are lacking with a good goalie prospect system, though.
I think that Cal Peterson in LA is going to be pretty good.
You think so?
I do. I've heard a lot of hype about him. I've seen him play this year, and he seems to be legit. That the Ottawa one is why I thought they were going to take a Skarov at 5 this year. And I think, Matt Murray is not going to be a long-term solution for them, although he has been playing a lot better since I trashed him, a few weeks ago. But yeah, those are the two teams that I look at and I say, okay, you're going to have a good future, although with Ottawa I'm less sure because of ownership. But anyway.
All right. Before we wrap out, for next week, I wanted to throw to you.
Yeah.
Let's both come back with our half-season awards predictions, and let's just do like winner and runner-up, just to try and simplify it a little bit.
It's funny because I was actually going to suggest the same thing.
There you go. Because I think next Friday we're doing our player drop on our hockey pool. So I think that we're doing it then because it's pretty close to halfway. So
yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, cool. Look forward to it. And I guess we'll have some more hockey to talk about. Hopefully better results. Maybe some news. And we'll do some more predictions next week. And so it's been another episode of Hockey Talk on the Rock.
Woohoo.
Woohoo. Thanks for listening, anybody. And until next time.